The scent of fresh baked pies cooling on windowsills mingled with the earthy smell of harvested wheat as Hannah Zimmerman stepped onto the main street of Yankton, South Dakota, her arms laden with bushels of late-season apples from her family's orchard. September of 1882 had arrived with golden sunlight and crisp mornings that promised a bountiful harvest, and the entire town buzzed with preparations for the annual Harvest Festival, now just 3 days away. Hannah adjusted the weight in her arms, her dark auburn hair catching the afternoon light as she made her way toward the general store, unaware that her carefully ordered life was about to be upended by a cowboy with rough hands and a gift for words that could move mountains. "Miss Zimmerman, let me help you with those," came a deep voice from behind her, and Hannah turned to find Ryder Garrison reaching for the topmost basket before she could protest. She had seen him around town before, this tall rancher with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds, but they had never exchanged more than polite nods. He worked the cattle ranch east of her family's orchard, spending most of his time on the range with his herd, and rumor had it he could rope a steer faster than any man in Dakota territory. "I can manage, Mr. Garrison, but thank you," Hannah said, though she felt the strain in her shoulders from carrying the heavy load 6 blocks from where her wagon was parked. She was 22 years old and had been managing her family's orchard alongside her aging father for the past 4 years since her mother passed. Independence had become her armor, and she wore it well. Ryder's mouth quirked at the corner, not quite a smile but something warmer than indifference. "I do not doubt that you can, but my mama would rise from her grave to haunt me if I let a lady struggle when I have 2 perfectly good hands." He was already lifting 2 of the heavier baskets, and Hannah found herself both irritated and grateful. At 25, Ryder had the weathered look of someone who had lived hard but honest, with calluses on his palms and dust permanently embedded in the creases of his work shirt. They walked together toward the general store, and Hannah noticed the way people watched them, the way Mrs. Henderson whispered to Mrs. Cole behind her fan. Small towns thrived on gossip, and Yankton was no exception. "Are you entering the festival competitions?" Hannah asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity, though she found herself hoping he would say yes. "The bronc riding and the sharpshooting, probably," Ryder replied, adjusting his grip on the baskets. "But I heard there is a new event this year, a speaking contest. Prize is $50 and a ribbon." He said it casually, but Hannah caught the flicker of interest in his expression. "A speaking contest at a harvest festival?" Hannah raised her eyebrows as they reached the wooden steps of Henrikson's general store. "That seems rather unusual. What are contestants supposed to speak about? Anything they want, apparently. 3 minutes to say whatever is on their mind. The judges will be Mayor Thompson, Reverend Walsh, and your father." Ryder set the baskets down carefully on the store's porch, and Hannah did the same with her remaining load. "I heard your father volunteered after they needed a 3rd judge." Hannah had not known this, but then her father often agreed to town responsibilities without mentioning them at home. Samuel Zimmerman had been the most successful orchardist in the region for 30 years, and his opinion carried weight in Yankton. "Well, I hope you win whatever you enter," she said, meaning it more than she expected to. There was something solid about Ryder Garrison, something that reminded her of the old oak trees in her orchard, deep-rooted and enduring. "And what about you, Miss Zimmerman? Will you be competing in anything?" Ryder asked, his gray eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street, and somewhere a dog barked at a passing wagon. "I have entered my apple preserves in the canning competition, and my father's apples in the produce display." Hannah replied, then added with a hint of pride, "And I have been nominated for Harvest Queen, though I do not expect to win." The Harvest Queen was crowned each year based on a combination of community contribution, the quality of goods entered in competitions, and a vote by the festival committee. It was more about service than beauty, which was the only reason Hannah had not immediately declined the nomination. Ryder's expression shifted, something like admiration crossing his features. "I would say your chances are better than you think. Your family's orchard has fed this town for longer than I have been alive, and everyone knows you have been running it mostly on your own since your father's health started failing." He spoke matter-of-factly, without pity, which Hannah appreciated more than she could express. "My father is stronger than people give him credit for," Hannah said, defensive despite knowing Ryder meant no offense. "He still makes every important decision about the orchard." "I did not mean any disrespect," Ryder said quietly. "I just meant that you deserve recognition for your hard work. That is all." He tipped his hat to her, a gesture so old-fashioned and courteous that Hannah felt her irritation melt away. "I should get back to the ranch before dark. Good afternoon, Miss Zimmerman." "Good afternoon, Mr. Garrison," Hannah replied, watching as he walked back down the street toward where his horse was tied outside the blacksmith shop. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, and Hannah found herself thinking about him as she carried her apples into the store, which was entirely unlike her usual practical nature. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Hannah and her father harvested the last of the season's apples, selecting the finest specimens for the festival display. She spent an entire evening polishing each apple until it gleamed, arranging them in her mother's old wicker basket lined with a blue gingham cloth. Her preserves were already sealed in mason jars with handwritten labels, and she had pressed her best dress, a deep green cotton with ivory lace at the collar that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. The morning of the harvest festival dawned clear and cool, with the kind of crystalline blue sky that seemed to exist only in Dakota territory in the autumn. Hannah helped her father load their entries into the wagon, along with 3 crates of apples to sell at their booth. Samuel Zimmerman moved slowly these days. His breathing labored from the lung ailment that had plagued him for the past 2 years, but his mind remained sharp as ever. "You look pretty, Hannah girl," he said as they drove toward town, the wagon wheels creaking in the familiar rhythm. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become." Hannah felt the familiar ache in her chest at the mention of her mother. "I wish she could be here to see the festival. She loved this day more than any other, even Christmas." "She is here," Samuel said, gesturing toward the fields of golden grain that stretched to the horizon, toward the trees heavy with fruit. "She is in every good thing we grow, in every person we have helped. That is the kind of legacy that matters, Hannah. Not money or land, but the goodness we leave behind." They arrived at the festival grounds to find the town square already transformed into a bustling celebration. Booths lined the streets, displaying everything from handmade quilts to farm equipment. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air, and a small band had set up on the gazebo, tuning their instruments for the afternoon's entertainment. Children ran between the adults, their laughter bright as bells, and Hannah felt her spirits lift despite her nervousness about the competitions. She helped her father set up their booth, arranging the apples in attractive pyramids and placing small samples of her preserves out for people to taste. Within an hour, they had sold half their stock, with orders for 3 more crates to be delivered the following week. Hannah was wrapping a dozen apples for Mrs. Chen, the laundress, when she spotted Ryder across the square. He was dressed differently than she had ever seen him, in clean dark trousers and a white shirt that looked freshly pressed, his hair combed back though already falling forward across his forehead. He was examining a saddle at the leather goods booth, running his hands over the tooled designs with the careful attention of someone who knew quality when he saw it. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded square. He nodded to her, and Hannah felt her cheeks warm as she nodded back. "That the Garrison boy?" her father asked, following her line of sight. "Good man, from what I hear. Works his ranch alone. Every dollar he makes goes back into improving his land and stock. The kind of man who builds something lasting." Hannah busied herself rearranging apples that did not need rearranging. "I barely know him, Papa." "Maybe you should change that," Samuel said mildly, and Hannah shot him a look that made him chuckle, then cough. She poured him water from their canteen and made him sit down on the stool they had brought, worry creasing her forehead. The morning gave way to afternoon, and the competitions began. Hannah entered her preserves and apples, receiving a second-place ribbon for the preserves and first place for the apple display. She was genuinely pleased, knowing that her mother's techniques lived on in the food she prepared. She watched the bronc riding from the fence rails, her heart in her throat as Ryder mounted a bucking horse that seemed determined to throw him into next week. He lasted the full 8 seconds, his body moving with the horse's rhythm as if he had been born in the saddle, and the crowd roared its approval when he dismounted, breathing hard but grinning. He won the bronc riding and placed second in sharpshooting, losing only to Tom Crawford, who had been the town's best shot for 15 years running. By the time the speaking contest was announced, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that matched the autumn leaves. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Thompson called from the gazebo, his voice carrying across the square. "We will now begin our first annual Harvest Festival speaking contest. 5 contestants will each have 3 minutes to address the crowd on a topic of their choosing. Our judges will select a winner based on the content, delivery, and impact of each speech. Our contestants are Ryder Garrison, Margaret Foster, William Hutchins, Dorothy Miles, and Jacob Webster. Contestants, please gather here." Hannah watched as Ryder made his way to the gazebo, standing with the other 4 contestants. She had wandered closer without realizing it, drawn by curiosity about what Ryder would say. She knew Margaret Foster was planning to speak about the importance of education for girls, having heard her practicing at the church social last week. William Hutchins would undoubtedly discuss agricultural innovations, his favorite subject. Dorothy Miles and Jacob Webster she knew less well, recent arrivals to Yankton in the past year. Margaret spoke first, delivering a passionate argument for expanding the schoolhouse to accommodate more advanced studies. The crowd applauded politely. William followed with his expected discourse on new plowing techniques, complete with technical details that had some audience members stifling yawns. Dorothy spoke about the need for a proper library in town, which garnered more enthusiasm. Jacob discussed water rights and irrigation, a topic of real concern to the farming community. Then it was Ryder's turn. He stepped forward to the front of the gazebo, and Hannah noticed he had no notes, nothing in his hands. He simply stood there for a moment, looking out at the assembled crowd, and when he began to speak, his voice was clear and strong without being loud. "I came to Dakota Territory 5 years ago with nothing but a horse, a saddle, and a stubborn refusal to give up on the idea that a man could build a life with his own 2 hands, Ryder began. "I had heard the land here was hard, that the winters would freeze you solid and the summers would bake you dry, that only fools and dreamers tried to make something of themselves this far from civilization. And I came anyway, because I believed in something I could barely put into words back then. Hannah found herself leaning forward, caught by the quiet intensity in his voice. Around her, the crowd had fallen silent, even the children sensing something important was happening. I believed that the true harvest is not just what we pull from the ground each autumn, Ryder continued. It is what we build together as a community. It is the farmer who shares his seed with a neighbor whose crop failed. It is the woman who sits up all night with a sick child that is not her own. It is the man who helps raise a barn for someone he barely knows, expecting nothing in return but the knowledge that when his own troubles come, someone will be there for him too. He paused, and Hannah saw him look directly at her father, then at several other people in the crowd, as if speaking to each one personally. I have seen this town pull together through droughts and blizzards, through grasshopper plagues and economic downturns that would have broken a lesser community. And the reason we survive is not because we have the best land or the most money or the easiest circumstances. It is because we have each other. It is because we understand that we are all part of the same harvest. Ryder's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction that Hannah could feel resonating in her own chest. When we crown our harvest queen today, we are not just honoring one person. We are honoring the spirit of generosity and hard work that she represents. We are acknowledging that the true wealth of this community is not measured in bushels of wheat or heads of cattle, but in the goodness of the people who choose to build their lives here, side by side, season after season. He stopped, taking a breath, and Hannah realized she had been holding hers. I am just a rancher, and words have never been my strong suit. I am better with a rope than a speech. But I wanted to say thank you to this town for teaching me what it means to belong somewhere, to be part of something bigger than myself. Whatever we harvest from this land, let us also harvest kindness, let us harvest community, and let us never forget that the best crop we can grow is the one we plant in each other's hearts. The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat before the crowd erupted into applause. Hannah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, moved by the simple honesty of Ryder's words. She saw her father clapping vigorously despite his labored breathing, saw women dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs, saw hardened ranchers nodding in agreement. The judges conferred for only a few minutes before Mayor Thompson stepped forward again. The judges are unanimous in their decision. The winner of the first annual Harvest Festival speaking contest is Ryder Garrison. More applause, whistles, and cheers filled the air as Ryder accepted the $50 prize and blue ribbon, looking almost embarrassed by the attention. Hannah wanted to go to him, to tell him how his words had touched her, but the crowd pressed around him with congratulations, and then Mayor Thompson was calling for attention again. And now, the moment many of you have been waiting for. It is time to announce this year's Harvest Queen. The committee has tallied the votes based on community contribution, competition results, and overall service to Yankton. This year's queen exemplifies all the qualities that Mr. Garrison so eloquently described in his speech. She works tirelessly to provide for her family and our community. She demonstrates excellence in her craft, and she does so with grace and humility. Hannah felt her stomach flutter nervously. There were 3 other nominees, any of whom would make a worthy queen. Our Harvest Queen for 1882 is Miss Hannah Zimmerman. The words did not register at first. Hannah stood frozen as people around her began applauding, as her father gripped her hand with tears in his eyes, as Mrs. Henderson rushed forward to usher her toward the gazebo. She walked as if in a dream, her legs carrying her forward while her mind struggled to catch up. Mayor Thompson placed a crown of woven wheat and autumn flowers on her head, the traditional symbol of the Harvest Queen. "Congratulations, Miss Zimmerman. You have served this community well, and we are honored to recognize you today." Hannah looked out at the crowd, at all the familiar faces she had known her entire life, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude and affection for these people who had supported her family through grief and hardship. Her gaze found Ryder, standing at the edge of the crowd, and he was smiling at her with such genuine warmth that she felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening to let in light. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice shaking slightly. "I do not have a speech prepared like Mr. Garrison, but I want to say that I am grateful to be part of this community. My family has been blessed by your friendship and support, and I hope to continue serving Yankton for many years to come." It was brief and inadequate compared to Ryder's eloquence, but the crowd seemed pleased, applauding warmly as she stepped down from the gazebo. People surrounded her with congratulations, and Hannah accepted them graciously while her mind kept returning to Ryder's speech, to the way he had spoken about community and belonging. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the square, the band began playing for the evening dance. Hannah's duties as Harvest Queen included opening the dance, and she stood uncertainly at the edge of the designated dance area, assuming Mayor Thompson or one of the other town officials would claim the honor of the first dance. Instead, she saw Ryder walking toward her, cutting through the crowd with determined purpose. "May I have this dance, Miss Zimmerman?" he asked, extending his hand. "I figure the contest winner and the Harvest Queen should open the dancing together." Hannah placed her hand in his, feeling the roughness of his calluses against her palm, the strength in his fingers as they closed around hers. "I would be honored, Mr. Garrison." He led her to the center of the dance area as the band struck up a waltz. Ryder's hand settled at her waist, proper but firm, and Hannah rested her free hand on his shoulder. They began to move, and she was surprised to discover that he danced well, leading her through the steps with quiet confidence. "Your speech was beautiful," Hannah said softly, aware of all the eyes watching them. "I did not know you had such a way with words." "I usually do not," Ryder admitted, his gray eyes holding hers. "I spent the past 3 days trying to figure out what to say. I must have written and thrown away 20 different speeches. But this morning, I was working in my pasture, watching the sun come up over the hills, and I thought about why I love this place so much. The words just came to me then." They turned together, Hannah's green dress swirling around her legs. "You said exactly what needed to be said. You reminded people what matters." "So did you, just by being yourself," Ryder said, and there was something in his voice that made Hannah's breath catch. "I have watched you for the past year, Miss Zimmerman. Ever since I helped your father repair his wagon wheel last September. I have seen how hard you work, how you care for your father, how you treat everyone with kindness even when you are exhausted. You deserve that crown more than anyone." Hannah felt heat rising to her cheeks, unused to such direct praise. "You hardly know me, Mr. Garrison. Then I would like to remedy that if you are willing." The song was ending, other couples joining them on the dance floor now. "May I call on you?" "Properly, I mean at your home with your father's permission." Hannah's heart hammered in her chest. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I would like that very much." Ryder's smile was like sunrise, transforming his weathered face into something almost boyish. "Then I will speak with your father tonight, if he is willing." They danced one more song before propriety dictated they separate, allowing others to congratulate Hannah and speak with Ryder. But Hannah felt his presence even when they were on opposite sides of the square, felt the awareness of him like a compass point always drawing her attention back to where he stood. True to his word, Ryder approached her father before the evening ended. Hannah watched from a distance as the two men spoke, saw her father nod and shake Ryder's hand, saw them both glance in her direction. When her father returned to where she stood with a group of women, his expression was thoughtful. "That young man just asked permission to court you," Samuel said without preamble. "I told him yes, but that it is your decision entirely. What do you say, Hannah girl?" Hannah looked across the square to where Ryder was untying his horse, preparing to ride back to his ranch. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up one last time, and even at this distance, she could see the question in his expression. She smiled and nodded, and even in the lamplight, she could see his answering grin. "I say yes, Papa," Hannah replied, and felt as if she were standing at the edge of something vast and unknown and wonderful, ready to step forward into whatever came next. Ryder arrived at the Zimmerman orchard the following Sunday afternoon, riding up the long drive with his hat in his hand, and his hair combed back with water. Hannah had been watching for him from the kitchen window, and she quickly untied her apron and checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door before walking out to meet him. The orchard spread around them in neat rows, the apple trees heavy with the last fruit of the season. The air smelled of ripening apples and dried grass, and the September sun was warm on Hannah's shoulders as she stepped off the porch. Ryder dismounted, and she noticed he had worn his good shirt again, the white one from the festival. "Good afternoon, Miss Zimmerman," he said, his voice formal but his eyes warm. "I hope I am not calling too early." "Not at all, Mr. Garrison. My father is resting, but he said to tell you that you are welcome and that I am allowed to walk with you through the orchard if I wish." Hannah felt suddenly shy, this proper courtship ritual so different from the easy conversation they had shared at the festival. "I would like that very much," Ryder said, tying his horse to the fence post. They began walking together down one of the rows of trees, maintaining a respectable distance between them. "Your orchard is beautiful. How many acres do you have planted?" 35 in apples, another 10 in pears and plums," Hannah replied, relaxing as they fell into conversation about farming and ranching, safer topics than the feelings that hummed between them. "My grandfather planted the first trees in 1851, when this was still wild country. My father expanded the orchard when he married my mother. It must be hard work, especially during harvest season," Ryder said, reaching up to examine an apple hanging from a nearby branch. "Do you hire help?" "We have 2 men who come during harvest, and my father still does what he can, though he tires more easily now." Hannah heard the worry in her own voice and tried to soften it. "We manage well enough. And what about your ranch? Do you run it entirely alone?" "I have a hired hand, Charlie Redmond, who helps with the cattle drives and roundups. But most of the daily work is just me. I have 200 head of cattle now, up from the 50 I started with 5 years ago." There was pride in Ryder's voice, the satisfaction of a man who had built something through sheer determination. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun filtering through the apple trees and casting dappled shadows on the ground. Hannah found herself stealing glances at Ryder, noticing details she had missed before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands moved expressively when he talked about his ranch, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his serious expression implied. "May I ask you something?" Ryder said suddenly, stopping beside an old tree that was Hannah's favorite, gnarled and twisted but still producing the sweetest apples in the orchard. "Of course," Hannah replied, turning to face him. Your father mentioned that you have had other suitors over the years, but that you never seemed interested in any of them. Why did you agree to let me court you?" His gray eyes searched hers, genuinely curious, with no trace of arrogance or assumption. Hannah considered the question, wanting to give him an honest answer. "I think it was your speech at the festival. You spoke about community and belonging, about building something that matters. Those are the things I value most in life. And I suppose I wanted to know if you meant those words, or if they were just pretty sounds for the contest." "I meant every word," Ryder said quietly. "I am not a man who says things he does not mean, Miss Zimmerman. It is not in my nature." "Hannah," she said impulsively. "When we are alone, you may call me Hannah, and I would like to call you Ryder if that is acceptable." His smile was slow and genuine. "I would like that very much, Hannah." They continued walking, and Hannah told him about her mother, about how she had learned to make preserves and tend the orchard, about the dreams she had of expanding the business to supply fruit to towns along the railway line. Ryder listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions and offering observations that showed he understood the complexities of agricultural business. In turn, he told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 19, about the decision to head west and make a fresh start where the past could not follow him. He spoke of the loneliness of those first years, of learning the hard way how to survive on the prairie, of the satisfaction he felt watching his herd grow and his ranch become profitable. "I always thought that once I had enough money, once I had proven I could succeed, then I would think about finding a wife and starting a family," Ryder said as they circled back toward the house. "But lately, I have been thinking that success does not mean much if you have no one to share it with. That maybe I have been building half a life, waiting for the other half to appear." Hannah's heart beat faster at the implication in his words. "And have you found the other half?" Ryder stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I think maybe I have. I know it is too soon to say such things, that I have only just started courting you, but I believe in being honest about my intentions. I am not looking for a casual acquaintance, Hannah. I am looking for a partner, someone to build a life with. If that is not what you want, if I am moving too fast, tell me now and I will slow down." Hannah looked at this man who spoke so plainly about his hopes and dreams, who wore his heart openly without shame or pretense. Everything in her practical nature told her to be cautious, to take time to guard her heart. But something deeper, something she was only beginning to recognize, urged her to be equally honest. "I want the same things you do," she said softly. "I have wanted them for years, but I never met anyone who seemed to understand what it means to really build a life together. Most men just wanted a housekeeper or a mother for their children, not a true partner. But when I listened to your speech, when you talked about harvesting kindness and planting goodness in each other's hearts, I thought maybe you were different. Maybe you understood." "I do understand," Ryder said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I want you to know that I see you, Hannah. Not just a pretty woman or a good cook or someone to run my household. I see your strength and your intelligence and your fierce love for your family. I see a woman who could be my equal in every way, someone I could trust with my dreams and my failures. That is what I am looking for. That is what I hope we might build together, if you will give me the chance." They had reached the house, and Hannah could see her father watching from the window, giving them privacy while still maintaining propriety. "Come back next Sunday," she said, her hand resting lightly on the porch railing. "And the Sunday after that, and all the Sundays until we both know for certain what we want." "I will be here," Ryder promised. He mounted his horse, settling into the saddle with easy grace. "Thank you for this afternoon, Hannah. It has been the best day I have had in longer than I can remember." Hannah watched him ride away, her hand raised in farewell, and felt hope blooming in her chest like the apple blossoms that would return in spring. She went inside to find her father smiling at her with knowing affection. "That one is different from the others," Samuel said simply. "I can see it in the way he looks at you, like you are something precious that he cannot quite believe he has found." "It is early days yet, Papa," Hannah said, but she could not keep the smile from her face. "We are just getting to know each other." "Sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up," her father replied, and Hannah thought perhaps he was right. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern that felt both thrilling and comfortable. Ryder came every Sunday afternoon without fail, and he and Hannah spent hours walking through the orchard, sitting on the porch talking, or helping her father with small repairs around the property. He proved himself handy with tools and generous with his time, never expecting anything in return except Hannah's company. In mid-October, Ryder invited Hannah to visit his ranch, and she made the journey with her father as chaperone, riding in their wagon while Ryder rode alongside on his horse. The Garrison Ranch lay 10 miles east of the Zimmerman orchard, a sprawling property of grassland and rolling hills with a creek running through the eastern pasture. The house was small but well built, a simple structure of wood and stone that Ryder had constructed himself during his first 2 years in Dakota Territory. Inside, everything was neat and functional, though clearly lacking a woman's touch. The furniture was sparse but solid, the floors swept clean, the windows facing east to catch the morning sun. "It is not much yet," Ryder said, showing them around with a hint of self-consciousness. "But it is mine, every board and nail. And I have plans to add on, to build a bigger kitchen and maybe another bedroom or two, when the time is right." Hannah walked through the small house, imagining how it could be with curtains at the windows, rugs on the floors, shelves filled with books and dishes. She pictured herself cooking at the stove, Ryder coming in from the range for dinner, children playing in the yard. The images came so easily, so naturally, that they startled her with their intensity. They spent the afternoon touring the property, admiring Ryder's cattle, visiting the barn where he stored hay and equipment. Samuel asked knowledgeable questions about water rights and grazing rotation, and Ryder answered with the detailed understanding of someone who had learned his business thoroughly. Hannah could see her father's approval growing, could see him recognizing in Ryder the same qualities that had made Samuel himself successful: hard work, careful planning, and unwavering integrity. On the ride home, Samuel was unusually quiet, and Hannah knew he was thinking about the future, about what would happen to the orchard when he was gone. Finally, he spoke. "That young man would make you a good husband, Hannah, but I worry about the orchard. You are my only child, and everything I have built will be yours someday. I do not want you to feel you have to choose between your inheritance and your happiness." "I have been thinking about that too, Papa," Hannah admitted. "But Ryder and I have not spoken of marriage yet. It is too soon." "Not so soon as you might think," Samuel said gently. "I have seen the way you look at each other. That is not the look of people who are undecided. That is the look of people who have already chosen, even if they have not said the words yet." Hannah could not deny it. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, she had fallen in love with Ryder Garrison. It was not the dramatic, overwhelming passion of storybooks, but something quieter and deeper, a certainty that settled into her bones like the knowledge of seasons changing. She loved his steadiness, his kindness, the way he listened to her opinions and respected her knowledge. She loved his hands, scarred and strong from work. She loved the way he looked at her father with genuine respect, not the false deference some men showed to gain favor. She loved his dreams and his determination to build something lasting. and she was almost certain he loved her too, though neither of them had spoken the words yet. November arrived with cold winds and the threat of early snow. The orchard had been harvested, the fruit sold or stored for winter, and Hannah found herself with more free time than she had during the busy harvest months. Ryder's visits became longer, often staying for dinner, and Samuel always excused himself early to his room, leaving the young couple to talk by the fire. It was on one such evening, with the wind howling outside and snow beginning to fall in earnest, that Ryder finally spoke the words that had been building between them for weeks. They were sitting on the settee in front of the fireplace, closer than propriety strictly allowed but still respectable, Hannah's sewing abandoned in her lap. Ryder had been telling her about his plans for the ranch in the spring, but his voice trailed off mid-sentence, and when Hannah looked up, she found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "I love you, Hannah," he said simply. "I have been trying to find the right moment to tell you, some perfect time or place, but I realize there is no such thing. There is only this moment, and the truth, and the hope that maybe you feel the same way I do." Hannah set aside her sewing, her hands trembling slightly. "I love you too, Ryder. I think I have loved you since the festival, since I heard you speak about harvesting kindness and planting goodness in each other's hearts. You made me believe in the possibility of a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams, and that is something I had stopped hoping I would ever find." Ryder took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Then marry me, Hannah. I know your father needs you, and I know the orchard is your legacy and your responsibility. I am not asking you to give that up. We can figure out how to manage both the orchard and the ranch. Maybe we live here part of the time and at my place part of the time. Maybe we hire more help so you do not have to carry the burden alone. I do not have all the answers yet, but I know I want to spend my life finding them with you." Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes, overwhelmed by the rightness of this moment, of this man who understood her so completely. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Ryder's kiss was gentle and reverent, his hand cradling her face as if she were something infinitely precious. Hannah leaned into him, feeling safe and desired and understood in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally drew apart, both of them were smiling, giddy with joy and relief. "I should speak to your father formally," Ryder said, though he made no move to let go of her hand. "Ask for his blessing properly." "He will say yes," Hannah assured him. "He likes you very much. But there are practical matters we need to discuss. The orchard really cannot be left unattended, especially during harvest season. And your ranch needs you as well. We need to think carefully about how to make this work." They talked long into the night, planning and dreaming, trying to solve the puzzle of combining their two lives. By the time Ryder left, with snow falling thick around him and a promise to return in 3 days with a ring, they had sketched out a rough plan. They would marry in the spring, after the last frost, but before the busy summer season. They would live at the Zimmerman house to be near Samuel, whose health continued to decline. Ryder would hire a full-time ranch hand to manage his property during the week, and he would spend weekends and slower periods at the ranch, while Hannah's hired men handled the orchard work. It was not perfect, but it was workable, and both of them were willing to make compromises for the sake of their future together. Samuel gave his blessing with tears in his eyes, embracing Ryder like a son, and telling him that he could not have chosen better if he had picked the man himself. Hannah watched the two men she loved most in the world shake hands and then hug, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Ryder returned 3 days later with a simple gold band set with a small sapphire, the blue stone reminding Hannah of the Dakota sky in summer. It fit perfectly on her finger, and she stared at it in wonder. This tangible symbol of the promises they had made to each other. Word of the engagement spread through Yankton within days, and Hannah found herself congratulated everywhere she went. The women of the church immediately began planning the wedding, offering to help with the dress, the food, the flowers. Mrs. Henderson insisted on baking the cake, and Reverend Walsh reserved the church for the second Saturday in May. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparation and planning. Hannah sewed her wedding dress by lamplight, creating a gown of ivory silk with lace sleeves and a train that she hoped her mother would have approved of. Ryder spent his time improving his ranch house, adding the kitchen and extra bedrooms he had mentioned, getting everything ready for the day when Hannah would be his wife. They saw each other as often as the weather allowed, stealing moments together between their work obligations, learning each other's habits and quirks and preferences. Hannah discovered that Ryder had a sweet tooth and a love of poetry, that he read Shakespeare by candlelight and knew entire passages of the sonnets by heart. Ryder learned that Hannah sang when she worked, old hymns and folk songs in a clear soprano voice, and that she had a fierce competitive streak when it came to checkers. Samuel's health declined through the winter, and Hannah nursed him through several bad spells, grateful for Ryder's steady presence during the worst nights. Ryder sat up with her father when Hannah needed rest, read to him from the newspaper, helped him settle his business affairs so that everything would be in order when the time came. "You are a good man, Ryder Garrison," Samuel told him one evening in March, when the first hints of spring were beginning to show in the warming temperatures. "You will take care of my girl when I am gone, and that gives me more peace than you can know." "I will love her and protect her for the rest of my life," Ryder promised. "You have my word." Samuel lived to see the apple blossoms bloom in late April, the orchard transforming into a sea of white and pink flowers that smelled like hope and new beginnings. He walked with Hannah through the rows of trees one last time, his breathing labored but his spirit strong, and told her how proud he was of the woman she had become. "Your mother and I built this orchard together," he said, resting under the old twisted tree that was Hannah's favorite. "Now you and Ryder will build something even greater. You will combine the orchard and the ranch and create something new, something that will last for generations. That is the true harvest, Hannah girl, not what we take from the ground, but what we leave for those who come after us." 3 days later, Samuel Zimmerman passed away in his sleep, peacefully and without pain. Hannah grieved deeply, but she was grateful that he had lived to see her happiness, to give his blessing to her marriage, to know that the orchard would be in good hands. The funeral was well attended, the entire town turning out to honor a man who had been a pillar of the community for 3 decades. Ryder stood beside Hannah throughout, his presence a solid anchor in the storm of her grief. They buried Samuel in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the orchard, and Hannah planted an apple seedling at the grave, a living memorial that would grow and bear fruit for years to come. In the wake of her father's death, there was discussion of postponing the wedding, but Hannah decided against it. "Papa wanted to see us married," she told Ryder. "He was so happy about the wedding. I think he would want us to go forward as planned, to celebrate life and love even in the midst of loss." So on the second Saturday in May, as apple blossoms drifted like snow through the warm spring air, Hannah Zimmerman walked down the aisle of Yankton's small church to marry Ryder Garrison. She wore her ivory silk dress and carried a bouquet of apple blossoms mixed with wildflowers. Ryder stood at the altar in a new black suit, his eyes shining with love and pride as he watched her approach. Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony, speaking about the sacred bonds of marriage and the importance of partnership and mutual respect. When it came time for the vows, Ryder's voice was steady and strong as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Hannah for all the days of his life. Hannah's voice shook with emotion, but she spoke clearly, promising the same. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Walsh said with a broad smile. "You may kiss your bride." Ryder's kiss was tender and full of promise, and Hannah felt joy bursting through her grief, felt hope and love intertwining to create something stronger than either emotion alone. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers as they turned to face their community as Mr. and Mrs. Garrison. The reception was held at the orchard, tables set up under the blooming trees, food spread out in abundance as the entire town celebrated with them. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts to the happy couple. Hannah danced first with Ryder, then with the mayor, then with several of the older men who had been friends of her father. But she kept returning to her husband, drawn to him like a compass to north, unable to stay away for long. As the sun set and lanterns were lit among the apple trees, Ryder pulled Hannah aside to a quiet corner of the orchard away from the festivities. "Are you happy?" he asked softly, his hand cupping her cheek. "Yes," Hannah replied, leaning into his touch. "I wish Papa could have been here to see it, but I think somehow he knows. I think he is happy for us." "I know he is," Ryder said. "He told me just before he died that I should always remember you are strong enough to stand on your own, and that my job is not to support you but to stand beside you. He made me promise I would never try to diminish your strength or silence your voice. He said the day I forget that is the day I will lose the best thing that ever happened to me." Fresh tears sprang to Hannah's eyes. "That sounds exactly like something he would say." "Then I will honor his wisdom every day of our lives," Ryder promised. "You are my equal, my partner, my love. I will never forget that." They kissed again under the apple trees, surrounded by the sweet scent of blossoms and the distant sound of celebration, and Hannah felt the last piece of her heart settle into place. She had found her home, not in a place but in a person, and that was worth more than all the orchards in Dakota Territory. The guests finally departed as night deepened, leaving Ryder and Hannah alone in the house that was now theirs. They stood together in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the celebration, and looked at each other with a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation. "Would you like some coffee?" Hannah asked, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. Ryder smiled and took those hands in his. "What I would like is to carry my wife over the threshold of our bedroom and begin our life together properly." Hannah blushed but nodded, and Ryder swept her up into his arms, carrying her through the house to the bedroom that had been hers alone for so many years, but would now be theirs to share. He set her down gently, and they stood facing each other in the lamplight. What followed was tender and sweet, two people learning each other in the most intimate way, giving and receiving comfort and pleasure in equal measure. Hannah had been nervous, her knowledge of such matters limited to whispered conversations with married women and her own imagination. But Ryder was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs and responses, and by the time dawn light began filtering through the windows, Hannah felt thoroughly loved and completely his. They lay tangled together in the morning light, Ryder tracing lazy patterns on Hannah's shoulder while she rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I have been thinking," Ryder said quietly, "about how to manage the orchard and the ranch. What if we expanded the orchard onto some of my land? We could combine the properties, run cattle on the grassland and plant fruit trees on the portions suitable for orchards. We would have a bigger operation, more diversified, stronger overall." Hannah lifted her head to look at him. "That could work. We would need more hired help, but with the profits from both operations combined, we could afford it. And it would mean you would not have to be torn between two places all the time. We could build it all together, one property, one family business. Exactly, Ryder said, his eyes bright with excitement. We could create something new, something that is ours, built on what your father started but expanded and improved. What do you think? I think it is brilliant, Hannah said, kissing him soundly. I think we should start planning immediately. We can survey your land, determine which areas are best suited for trees, figure out water access and irrigation. Oh, Ryder, this could be wonderful. They spent the rest of the morning in bed, not making love but talking and planning, sketching out their dreams for the future. By the time they finally rose and dressed, they had the rough outline of a business plan that would combine their resources and skills into something greater than either could have built alone. The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and learning. They hired 3 more men to help with the expanded operation, and Hannah taught them the intricacies of orchard management, while Ryder oversaw the cattle and the planting of new fruit trees on his former grazing land. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk and fell into bed exhausted each night, but they were building something together, and the satisfaction of that work was immense. In the fall, they attended the harvest festival as a married couple, and Hannah felt a bittersweet pang as she remembered the previous year, when she had been crowned queen and Ryder had won the speaking contest. So much had changed in just 1 year, so much joy and sorrow woven together like threads in a tapestry. This year, a new queen was crowned, young Dorothy Miles, who had spoken at the contest the previous year. The speaking contest was won by William Hutchins, whose improved agricultural techniques had helped several farms increase their yields. Hannah and Ryder applauded both winners warmly, then slipped away from the crowds to walk through the town square hand in hand. You ever regret it? Hannah asked as they paused by the gazebo where Ryder had given his speech. Giving up your ranch to combine it with the orchard. You built that place from nothing. It must have been hard to let it go. Ryder turned her to face him, his hands resting on her shoulders. I did not give anything up, Hannah. I gained everything. I have you. I have a business that is stronger because we built it together. I have a home that feels complete because you are in it. I would give up 10 ranches for that, and never regret it for a moment. Hannah smiled, reaching up to touch his face. I love you, Ryder Garrison. And I love you, Hannah Garrison, he replied, and kissed her there in the autumn twilight while the festival continued around them and the future stretched out bright and full of promise. Winter came again, and Hannah discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled them both with joy and wonder, and Ryder became even more protective, insisting Hannah rest more and let the hired men handle the heavier work. Hannah tolerated his hovering with amused patience, knowing it came from love even when it drove her to distraction. The baby was born in late May, just after the 2nd anniversary of their wedding. Labor was long and difficult, and there were hours when Ryder paced the kitchen in terror while the midwife worked upstairs. But finally, a lusty cry rang through the house, and Mrs. Chen came down to tell him he had a son. Ryder took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Hannah propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a red-faced infant wrapped in a blanket. A boy, she said softly, tears streaming down her face. We have a son, Ryder. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring down at the tiny face with an expression of such awe and tenderness that Hannah felt her heart might burst. He is perfect, Ryder whispered. Absolutely perfect. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at her son, Hannah knew exactly what he should be called. Samuel, she said. "After my father, Samuel Ryder Garrison." "Samuel," Ryder repeated, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. Little Sam immediately gripped his father's finger with surprising strength, and Ryder laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Hello, Samuel. I am your papa, and I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know about being a good man." The years that followed were filled with the beautiful chaos of raising a family while managing a growing agricultural business. Little Sam was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Rose, after Hannah's mother, whose middle name had been Rosalie. Then came another boy, James, and finally another girl, Emma. The house was always full of noise and laughter, children running through the orchard, learning to ride horses, helping with small chores as they grew older. Ryder and Hannah expanded the business steadily, their combined orchard and ranch becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. They supplied fruit to towns along the railway line, as Hannah had once dreamed, and Ryder's cattle were known for their quality throughout Dakota Territory. But they never let the business consume them entirely, always making time for family dinners, for reading stories to the children, for Sunday picnics under the apple trees. The town of Yankton grew and prospered along with them. The library that Dorothy Miles had advocated for in her speech finally became a reality, funded in part by a generous donation from the Garrisons. The schoolhouse was expanded to include advanced studies, just as Margaret Foster had hoped. The speaking contest became an annual tradition at the Harvest Festival, and Ryder served as a judge several times, always encouraging contestants to speak from the heart rather than trying to be eloquent. Hannah never competed for Harvest Queen again, but she remained active in community life, organizing charity drives for families in need and teaching younger women the art of preserving and canning. She and Ryder were known as a couple who truly worked as partners, whose respect and affection for each other never dimmed even as the years passed, and their hair began to show silver. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ryder arranged a special celebration. He had the old gazebo in the town square repaired and repainted, decorating it with autumn flowers and lanterns, just as it had been for that long-ago Harvest Festival. He invited the whole town to join them for a renewal of their vows, wanting to publicly reaffirm his love and commitment to the woman who had transformed his life. Hannah wore a dress of deep green that reminded Ryder of the one she had worn to that first festival, though her figure was fuller now after 4 children, her face showing the lines of a life well lived. To him, she was even more beautiful than she had been at 22, her beauty now layered with wisdom and experience and the deep contentment of a woman who knew herself loved. They stood together in the gazebo while Reverend Walsh, now quite elderly but still officiating at important ceremonies, led them through the vow renewal. Their 4 children stood nearby, Samuel now a tall young man of 18, Rose a lovely girl of 16, James a sturdy 14, and little Emma just 10 years old but already showing signs of her mother's intelligence and determination. When it came time for Ryder to speak, he pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket, the same speech he had given 20 years earlier at the first speaking contest. "I want to read this again," he said to the assembled crowd, "because everything I said then is still true now, only more so. I said that the true harvest is what we build together as a community, that we are all part of the same harvest. I have spent the past 20 years harvesting kindness with my wife, planting goodness in each other's hearts and in the hearts of our children. And I can tell you that it is the best crop I have ever grown." He set the paper aside and took Hannah's hands, speaking directly to her now. "You have been my equal and my partner in every way. You have challenged me to be better, supported me when I faltered, and loved me even when I was difficult to love. You have given me 4 incredible children and a life richer than I ever dreamed possible. I would choose you again, Hannah, every single day for the rest of my life." Hannah was crying openly now, not bothering to hide her tears. "And I would choose you, Ryder. You kept every promise you made to me. You stood beside me, not over me or behind me, but beside me as a true partner. You honored my father's memory by loving his daughter well. You built a legacy not just in land and cattle and fruit trees, but in the family we created together, in the values we taught our children, in the love we shared. You are the harvest of my heart." They kissed to thunderous applause, and then the celebration began, music and dancing just like that first festival so many years ago. Ryder danced first with Hannah, then with each of his daughters, then back to Hannah again because he could never stay away from her for long. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, casting golden light over the gathered crowd, Sam Garrison approached his parents with a young woman on his arm. "Mama, Papa, I would like you to meet Catherine Wells. Her family just moved to Yankton last month. Her father bought the old Morrison place south of town." Catherine was a pretty girl with dark hair and warm brown eyes, and she blushed as she greeted Ryder and Hannah. But what caught Hannah's attention was the way her son looked at this girl, with an expression she recognized all too well. It was the same way Ryder had looked at her 20 years ago, like he had found something precious and rare. "It is very nice to meet you, Catherine," Hannah said warmly. "I hope we will be seeing more of you." "I hope so too, Mrs. Garrison," Catherine replied softly, and the look she gave Sam suggested the feeling was mutual. Later, as Hannah and Ryder walked home through the orchard under a sky full of stars, Ryder voiced what they were both thinking. "Our boy is falling in love." "I know," Hannah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It seems like just yesterday he was a baby in my arms, and now he is looking at girls the way you looked at me." "Let us hope he has the same good fortune I did," Ryder said, kissing the top of her head. "Let us hope he finds someone who will be his partner and his equal, who will build a life with him the way you built one with me." They reached the house, its windows glowing warm with lamplight, and stood for a moment looking at what they had created. The orchard stretched around them, the trees they had planted together now mature and productive. The house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. The barn was full of equipment and livestock. The hired men's quarters hummed with quiet activity as the workers settled in for the night. But more than the physical property, they had built something intangible and precious. A family rooted in love and respect, a business based on integrity and hard work, a legacy that would outlast them both. They had harvested kindness and planted goodness, just as Ryder had spoken about in that long-ago speech, and the crop had been bountiful beyond measure. "Shall we go in?" Hannah asked, though she was reluctant to end this perfect evening. "In a moment," Ryder said, turning her to face him. "I just want to stand here with you for a little while longer, looking at everything we have built together. I want to remember this moment, this feeling of complete contentment and gratitude. I want to remember how lucky I am to have found you, to have loved you, to have shared this life with you." Hannah reached up to cup his face, this man who had been her partner for 20 years and would be her partner for however many years they had left. "I am the lucky one," she said. "You showed me what it means to be truly seen and valued. You gave me a family and a life beyond anything I imagined. You kept your promise to stand beside me, and I have never walked alone since the day I married you." They kissed there under the stars, surrounded by the fruit of their labor, both literal and metaphorical, and it was as sweet as their first kiss had been 20 years before. Some things, Hannah reflected, only got better with time. They finally went inside to find their children waiting for them, wanting to hear stories about the original Harvest Festival, about how their parents had fallen in love. They gathered in the parlor, the fire crackling cheerfully, and Ryder and Hannah took turns telling the tale they had told many times before but never tired of sharing. "So you won a speaking contest, and Mama was crowned Harvest Queen on the same day?" Rose asked, her romantic heart clearly captured by the story. "That is right," Ryder confirmed. "And I knew that very day that your mother was special, that she was someone I wanted to know better." "But you did not propose right away?" James asked, practical like his mother. "No, we took our time," Hannah said. "We courted properly, getting to know each other, making sure we were truly compatible. Love is wonderful, but a successful marriage requires more than just love. It requires respect, shared values, and the willingness to work together through difficulties." "Did you ever have difficulties?" Emma asked, young enough to still believe her parents were perfect. Ryder and Hannah exchanged a glance, remembering the arguments they had weathered over the years, the times when exhaustion or worry had made them short with each other, the challenges of combining two businesses and two sets of priorities. "Of course we did," Ryder said honestly. "Every marriage has difficult moments, but we always remembered that we were on the same team, working toward the same goals. We never let anger or pride get in the way of solving problems together. And we never went to bed angry," Hannah added. "We made a promise early in our marriage that we would always resolve our disagreements before going to sleep, even if it meant staying up late to talk things through. Sometimes the conversations were hard, but they kept small problems from becoming big ones." Sam, who had been quiet through most of the storytelling, spoke up. "Catherine wants to be a teacher. She told me she hopes to work at the schoolhouse once she finishes her own education. I think that is wonderful, but I worry people might think it is strange if my wife works outside the home." Ryder leaned forward, fixing his son with a serious look. "If you love this girl, if you respect her dreams and ambitions, then you support them regardless of what other people think. Your mother worked beside me every day of our marriage, running the business side of this operation while I handled the ranching. People could have gossiped about that if they wanted to, but we never cared because we knew we were building something worthwhile together. If Catherine wants to teach and you want to marry her, then you find a way to make both things work." "Your father is right," Hannah said. "A woman is not just a wife or a mother, though those roles are important. She is a person with her own talents and dreams, and a good husband celebrates those things rather than trying to suppress them. If Catherine is meant to be a teacher, then you should encourage that, not discourage it." Sam nodded slowly, absorbing his parents' wisdom. "That is what I thought, but I wanted to hear you say it. Thank you." The conversation continued late into the evening, the family bond strengthening through the sharing of stories and values and hopes for the future. Finally, the children drifted off to bed one by one until only Ryder and Hannah remained by the dying fire. "Sam is going to marry that girl," Ryder said with certainty. "I can see it in his eyes. He has already decided, even if he does not fully realize it yet." "I know," Hannah said, settling against her husband's side, "and I think she will be good for him. She seems intelligent and kind, and if she has the courage to pursue teaching, she has the strength to be a good partner to our son. They will build something together, just as we did," Ryder mused. "And maybe someday their children will sit by a fire and hear the story of how their parents met. That is how legacies are built, one generation passing wisdom to the next." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, thinking about the passage of time, about how quickly years could slip by when you were living a full and purposeful life. 20 years of marriage, 4 children raised, a successful business built from 2 struggling operations, a community served and strengthened. It had been a good life, a life worth living. "You remember what you said in your wedding vows?" Hannah asked suddenly. "You promised to love, honor, and cherish me for all the days of your life. Have you kept that promise, Ryder?" He turned to look at her, his gray eyes still as clear and honest as they had been the day they met. "Every single day, Hannah. I have loved you in the big moments and the small ones. I have honored you by treating you as my equal and respecting your opinions. I have cherished you by holding you close through joy and sorrow, by building a life that reflects what matters most to both of us. And I will continue to keep that promise until the day I die." "Then we have done well," Hannah said softly. "We have built a harvest worth celebrating." The years continued to roll by, bringing changes both expected and unexpected. Sam did indeed marry Catherine Wells in a beautiful ceremony 3 years after Ryder and Hannah's vow renewal. The young couple settled on a portion of the Garrison land, building a small house near the orchard, and Catherine taught at the schoolhouse, just as she had dreamed. They had 3 children in quick succession, giving Ryder and Hannah their first grandchildren and filling the property with a new generation of laughter. Rose married a banker from Sioux Falls and moved away, though she visited often with her husband and their eventual 2 children. James took over the ranching portion of the family business, showing the same dedication and skill his father had always demonstrated. Emma, the youngest and brightest, surprised everyone by going to college in Chicago to study business, then returning to Yankton to apply modern accounting and management techniques to the family operation, increasing profits by 20% in her first year. Ryder and Hannah gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, training their children to take over while they enjoyed a slower pace of life. They spent their days working in the garden Hannah had always wanted but never had time for, reading books aloud to each other on the porch, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and volunteering in the community they had served for so long. On the 40th anniversary of their wedding, the entire family gathered at the orchard for a celebration that drew half the town. Yankton had grown significantly since 1882, now a prosperous town with electric lights and paved streets, though it retained the strong sense of community that had always defined it. Ryder, now 65 with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes from a lifetime of smiling, stood before the assembled crowd with Hannah beside him. They had aged together gracefully, their love only deepening with the passing years, and everyone who saw them together could see the affection that still burned bright between them. 40 years ago, Ryder began, his voice still strong though not as deep as it once was, I stood in front of this community and gave a speech about harvesting kindness and planting goodness in each other's hearts. At the time, I was speaking theoretically about ideals I believed in but had not fully lived yet. Today, I can speak from experience. He took Hannah's hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. This woman beside me has been my greatest teacher and my closest friend. Together, we have harvested more kindness than I ever imagined possible. We have planted goodness not just in each other's hearts, but in the hearts of our children and grandchildren. We have built a legacy that goes beyond land and money, a legacy of love and partnership and service to others. Hannah spoke next, her voice wavering slightly with emotion. I was crowned Harvest Queen 40 years ago, and I thought that was the greatest honor I would ever receive. I was wrong. The greatest honor has been living these 40 years with a man who kept every promise he ever made to me. Ryder has stood beside me through joy and sorrow, through abundance and difficulty, always my partner and my equal. If I have any wisdom to share with you, particularly you young people just starting out, it is this. Choose a partner who sees you fully and loves you anyway. Choose someone who will celebrate your strengths and support you through your weaknesses. Choose someone who will build with you rather than for you or over you. That is the key to a harvest that will sustain you for a lifetime. The celebration continued well into the evening, multiple generations of Garrisons dancing and laughing and sharing stories. Sam and Catherine's oldest son, now 14, and the image of his grandfather, asked Ryder to tell the story of the speaking contest one more time. "I have told that story 100 times, Ryder protested, but he was smiling. "Just once more, Grandpa," the boy pleaded. "I want to hear how you won Grandma's heart with your words." So Ryder told the story again, and as he spoke, Hannah watched the faces of their family members, saw the love and respect shining in their eyes, and felt profoundly grateful. They had built this, she and Ryder together. This family, this legacy, this life filled with meaning and purpose. They had taken the raw materials of 2 struggling agricultural operations and 2 lonely hearts and transformed them into something beautiful and enduring. That night, after the guests had departed and the house had fallen quiet, Ryder and Hannah walked one last time through the orchard. The apple trees, some of them planted by Hannah's grandfather 70 years earlier, stood silvered in the moonlight. The air smelled of earth and growing things, familiar and comforting. "I have been thinking about your father's words," Ryder said as they walked arm in arm. "About how the true harvest is not what we take from the ground, but what we leave for those who come after us. I think we have left something good, Hannah. I think when we are gone, people will remember us not for how much money we made or how much land we owned, but for the way we loved each other and raised our children and served our community." "That is all I ever wanted," Hannah said, leaning her head on his shoulder just as she had done for 40 years. "To live a life that mattered, to love and be loved, to leave the world a little better than I found it, and I could not have done any of it without you." They reached the old twisted tree, Hannah's favorite, and stood beneath its branches. Ryder turned to face his wife, seeing not the silver in her hair or the lines on her face, but the same strong, intelligent, beautiful woman he had fallen in love with 40 years earlier. "I would do it all again," he said simply. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you again and again and again." "As would I," Hannah replied, her eyes bright with tears. "You have been the greatest blessing of my life, Ryder Garrison. You have been my home and my heart." They kissed beneath the ancient apple tree, 2 people who had built a life together through hard work, mutual respect, and abiding love. And if the harvest of their love could be measured, it would be measured not in bushels of apples or heads of cattle, but in the strength of family bonds, in the prosperity of their community, in the wisdom passed from one generation to the next, and in the simple, profound fact that they had chosen each other and never regretted that choice for a single day. The years that remained to them were peaceful and full. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated new births and new weddings, and eventually welcomed great-grandchildren into the family. Ryder's health remained strong well into his 70s, though he moved more slowly and tired more easily. Hannah developed arthritis in her hands, but kept them nimble by knitting blankets for every new baby born in Yankton. On a cool October evening, just after the harvest had been brought in, Ryder and Hannah sat together on the porch swing they had installed 30 years earlier. The sun was setting over the orchard, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The leaves were turning gold, and there was a crispness in the air that promised winter would come early that year. "Do you hear that?" Hannah asked, tilting her head. Ryder listened. From inside the house came the sound of their great-granddaughter practicing piano, the notes stumbling but determined. From the barn came James calling to the horses. From the field beyond came Sam's voice as he directed the final harvest work. The sounds of family, the sounds of home. "I hear it," Ryder said, pulling Hannah closer. "I hear everything we built together. It is a beautiful sound." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, their hands clasped together, their hearts beating in the familiar rhythm they had shared for nearly 50 years. Whatever time remained to them, whether days or months or years, they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, as partners, as the two halves of one whole. And when the time came, many years later, for them to finally rest from their labors, they would leave behind a legacy that proved the truth of Ryder's long-ago words. That the true harvest is what we build together, what we plant in each other's hearts, and what we leave for those who come after us. They had harvested kindness and planted goodness, and the crop would nourish generations yet unborn, a testament to the power of love, partnership, and the choice to build something lasting together. The orchard would continue to bloom each spring. The cattle would continue to graze on the hills. The family would continue to grow and prosper. And somewhere in it all, the memory of a cowboy who won a speaking contest and a woman crowned harvest queen would live on. Their love story becoming legend, their example inspiring others to choose partnership over power, collaboration over control, and love over everything else. That was their harvest, and it was bountiful beyond measure.